Kwame Osi sat in his corner office on the 40th floor, looking out at the city below. The morning sun reflected off the glass buildings, creating patterns of light across his desk. On that desk sat a folder that had occupied his thoughts for the past 3 weeks. The folder belonged to TechRise Solutions, a startup company that wanted his money. At 42 years old, Kwame had seen many business proposals. His investment firm managed over $500 million. Young companies came to him every week, hoping he would believe in their dreams. Most of them had good ideas. Some had brilliant ideas. But Kwame had learned something important over his 20 years in business. A good idea meant nothing if the people running the company had bad values. Kwame picked up the folder and opened it again. TechRise had created software that helped other businesses work faster and smarter. The technology was impressive. The market research showed strong demand. The financial projections looked realistic. On paper, everything seemed perfect. TechRise needed $15 million to grow bigger. For Kwame, $15 million was a significant investment, but not an impossible one. He stood up and walked to the window. His reflection stared back at him. A tall man with short gray hair at his temples. He wore an expensive suit tailored perfectly to fit him. Anyone looking at him would see a successful businessman. But Kwame remembered a different version of himself. 23 years ago, he had arrived in America from Ghana with 2 suitcases and big dreams. He was 19 years old. He spoke English well, but his accent was thick. People often asked him to repeat himself. Some were patient. Others were not. He worked at a grocery store during the day and studied at night. Later, he drove a taxi while completing his MBA. He remembered customers who refused to ride with him because of how he looked or how he spoke. He remembered job interviews where people decided he was not good enough before he even opened his mouth. Those memories never left him. Even now, with all his success and money, Kwame could recall exactly how it felt to be dismissed and underestimated. Those experiences had shaped how he did business today. His phone buzzed. A message from Min-Jun Park, his business partner and closest friend. "Still thinking about TechRise?" the message asked. Kwame smiled slightly. Min-Jun knew him too well. They had built this firm together 12 years ago. Min-Jun was 45, a Korean immigrant who had his own stories of being overlooked and underestimated in the business world. Together, they had created something special. Their firm did not just invest money. They invested in people and cultures that matched their values. Kwame typed back, "Meeting with the team in 10 minutes. I have a plan." He walked down the hall to the conference room. Inside, 4 of his top analysts waited. There was Sarah, who specialized in technology investments. Marcus handled financial modeling. Jennifer reviewed legal documents. And David researched market trends. All of them were talented. All of them had been given chances by Kwame when other firms had passed them over. "Good morning, everyone," Kwame said as he entered. His Ghanaian accent was present but controlled. Years of practice had taught him how to adjust his speech for different situations. In business meetings, he spoke clearly and precisely, but he never tried to completely hide where he came from. That accent was part of his identity. "We are here to discuss TechRise Solutions," he continued, placing the folder on the table. "I have reviewed their proposal thoroughly. The technology is solid. The team has experience. The market opportunity is real. By all normal measures, we should invest." Sarah leaned forward. "I sense a but coming," Kwame nodded. "But we do not make decisions based only on spreadsheets and presentations. We need to understand who these people really are, what they value, how they treat others when money and success are not involved." Marcus spoke up. "Are you thinking about doing your usual test?" "I am," Kwame confirmed. His team members exchanged knowing looks. They had seen Kwame do this before. It was unorthodox, perhaps even strange to outsiders, but it had saved them from several bad investments over the years. Kwame's method was simple but revealing. Before investing millions of dollars, he would apply for an entry-level or mid-level position at the company under a simple resume. He would go through their interview process as a regular job candidate. He would see how they treated someone who appeared to have no power, no money, no influence. A company's true character shows in how they treat people who cannot do anything for them, Kwame explained. Though his team had heard this philosophy many times, anyone can be polite and respectful to a rich investor. But how do they treat a job applicant? How do they speak to someone they think is beneath them? That tells me everything I need to know. Jennifer asked. What position are you applying for? Marketing coordinator, Kwame answered. Mid-level? Not too junior, not too senior. It requires skills and experience so I can have real conversations with them. TechRise posted the opening last week. David pulled up his laptop. I am looking at their website now. They are actively recruiting for several positions. Marketing coordinator is listed with a salary range of $60,000 to $75,000. Kwame smiled. Perfect. I will apply today using my alternate email and a simplified resume. Just enough experience to get an interview, but nothing that would make them suspect who I really am. Sarah asked the question that always came up. What about your accent? You know, some people react to it. Kwame's expression became serious. I will not hide my accent. In fact, I will let it be more natural than I usually do in business settings. If they have a problem with how I speak, I need to know that before I give them $15 million. The room fell quiet. Everyone understood what Kwame was really testing. He was not just evaluating their business practices. He was checking for the kind of prejudice and discrimination that could destroy a company from the inside. What if they recognize you? Marcus asked. Your face has been in business magazines and websites. My professional photos show me in expensive suits, usually in very formal settings, Kwame replied. For the interview, I will dress professionally but simply. Regular clothes that any job candidate would wear. No luxury brands, no expensive watch. Most people see what they expect to see. They will expect a job applicant, so that is what they will see. He stood and walked to the window again. Below, thousands of people moved through the city streets. Each one had their own story, their own struggles, their own dreams. Kwame had never forgotten that he was once one of them. Set up the usual monitoring, he instructed his team. I want to know everything about TechRise's culture. Talk to former employees if you can find any. Check online reviews. Look at their hiring patterns over the past 3 years. But do it quietly. I do not want them to know we are investigating beyond the standard due diligence. His team nodded and began taking notes. When are you scheduling the interview? Sarah asked. As soon as they respond to my application, Kwame said. Probably within a week if they are serious about hiring. In the meantime, I will study their marketing strategies and prepare talking points. I need to be convincing as a real candidate. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes as they discussed details. Kwame would use the name Kwame Mensah instead of Kwame Osi. Mensah was his mother's family name. He would list previous marketing experience from early in his career before he became an investor. All of it was true, just incomplete. After the meeting ended, Kwame returned to his office and opened his personal laptop. He spent 2 hours crafting the perfect resume. Not too impressive, not too plain. Just right for a marketing coordinator position. He included his real education credentials but left out the prestigious business school he had attended later. He listed job experiences from 15 and 20 years ago, leaving out everything that came after. When he finished, he read through the resume one more time. On paper, he looked like a capable professional with decent experience. Nothing more, nothing less. Exactly what he wanted. He attached the resume to an email and wrote a brief cover letter expressing interest in the marketing coordinator position. His finger hovered over the send button for a moment. Then he clicked it. The email disappeared into the digital world, traveling instantly to TechRise Solutions. Somewhere in their office it would land in an inbox. Someone would read it. Someone would make a judgment about him based on words on a screen. Kwame leaned back in his chair and waited. In a few days, he would know if TechRise wanted to interview him. And if they did, he would discover what kind of people were really running that company. Outside his window, the sun continued its path across the sky. The city kept moving, and Kwame Osi, one of the most successful investors in the country, prepared to become invisible. 3 days later, Kwame received an email from TechRise Solutions. They wanted to interview him for the marketing coordinator position. The email was friendly and professional. It came from someone named Brad Mitchell, senior recruiter. The interview was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 2 p.m. Kwame forwarded the email to Minjun with a simple message. It begins. Minjun called him immediately. Are you sure about this? You could just do a normal site visit like other investors. And miss the chance to see who they really are. Kwame replied. No, this is too important. On Tuesday morning, Kwame dressed carefully. He chose a navy blue suit from the back of his closet, one he had not worn in years. It was nice but not expensive looking. He wore a simple white shirt and a plain tie. No designer labels, no luxury watch. Instead, he wore an ordinary watch he had purchased at a department store specifically for occasions like this. He looked at himself in the mirror. He looked like exactly what he was pretending to be, a regular professional hoping to land a good job. Before leaving, he practiced speaking in his natural accent. Over the years, Kwame had learned to moderate his Ghanaian accent in business settings. It was still there, but softened and controlled. Today, he would not do that. Today, he would speak the way he had spoken when he first arrived in America. He would let his accent be full and natural. If that bothered them, he needed to know. The drive to TechRise Solutions took 40 minutes. Their office was in a modern building in the business district. Kwame parked his car, not his usual luxury vehicle, but a simple sedan he kept for situations like this, and walked to the entrance. The lobby was bright and clean with expensive furniture and large screens displaying the company logo. He took the elevator to the 7th floor. The TechRise office had glass walls and open spaces. Young people sat at desks with multiple computer monitors. The atmosphere buzzed with energy. Everyone looked busy and focused. Kwame noticed that most of the employees were white or Asian. He saw very few black or Latino faces. "Can I help you?" asked the receptionist, a young woman with a friendly smile. "Yes, I have an interview at 2 o'clock, Kwame said, letting his accent flow naturally. "My name is Kwame Mensah. Of course. Please have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly." Kwame sat in the waiting area and observed. He watched how employees interacted with each other. He listened to conversations. He looked at the photos on the walls showing company events and team celebrations. In all those photos, he counted maybe 3 or 4 black employees out of what looked like 50 or 60 people total. After 10 minutes, a man appeared. He was in his early 30s with styled blonde hair and an expensive suit. He walked with confidence that bordered on arrogance. "Kwame Mensah?" he called out, not quite getting the pronunciation right despite it being phonetic. "Yes, that is me," Kwame said, standing up. "Great. I'm Brad Mitchell, senior recruiter. Follow me." They walked through the office to a conference room. Inside, a woman in her late 20s was already seated. She had dark hair pulled back and wore a professional dress. "This is Stephanie Torres," Brad said. "She's one of our recruiters. We'll both be interviewing you today." "Nice to meet you both," Kwame said, shaking their hands. He sat down across from them and placed his folder on the table. Inside were copies of his resume and examples of marketing work he had done years ago. Brad opened a laptop and glanced at some notes. "So Kwame, thanks for coming in. Why don't you start by telling us a little about yourself?" Kwame began speaking, describing his background and experience. He kept his answers relevant but simple. He mentioned working in marketing for various companies, creating campaigns, analyzing data, managing social media accounts. Everything he said was true, just carefully selected from a specific period of his life. As he spoke, he noticed Brad's expression change slightly. It was subtle at first, a small furrow in his brow. A quick glance at Stephanie. Brad leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Sorry," Brad interrupted. "Could you repeat that last part?" "I'm having a little trouble understanding you." Kwame paused. His words had been clear. He had spoken slowly and carefully, but he repeated himself anyway. "I said that in my previous position I managed 3 major campaigns that increased customer engagement by 40%. Right, Brad said, though his tone suggested he was still not satisfied. "And where exactly was this previous position?" "At a consulting firm in Boston," Kwame answered. "I worked there for 4 years. Stephanie wrote something down. She seemed uncomfortable, shifting in her seat. She smiled at Kwame, but it looked forced. Brad continued asking questions. Each time Kwame answered, Brad would pause and sometimes ask him to repeat himself. Kwame knew his accent was not that difficult to understand. He had been speaking English his entire life. He had taught classes, given presentations, led business meetings. The problem was not his clarity. The problem was Brad's attitude. "So, Kwame," Brad said, leaning forward, "TechRise is a fast-paced, dynamic environment. We need people who can communicate clearly with team members, clients, and stakeholders. Do you think you'd be comfortable in that kind of setting?" The question hung in the air. Kwame understood what Brad was really asking. He was questioning whether Kwame could fit into their culture, whether he could communicate well enough, whether his accent would be a problem. "I am very comfortable in professional environments," Kwame said evenly. "Communication is about clarity of thought and message, not about accent. I have worked in many different settings with diverse teams. I have always been able to communicate effectively." Brad smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Of course. I'm just thinking about practical matters. We have a lot of client-facing work here. Presentations, video calls, that sort of thing." "I understand," Kwame said. "I have extensive experience with client presentations. In fact, in my last position, I regularly presented to senior executives. Things must work a bit differently where you're from, though. Right?" Brad said. "I mean, business culture varies by region and, well, background." Stephanie's eyes widened slightly. She looked at Brad, then quickly back at her notes. She was clearly uncomfortable with where this conversation was going, but she said nothing. Kwame felt his jaw tighten. He had expected some level of bias, but Brad was not even trying to hide it. Every question seemed designed to highlight Kwame's accent and origins rather than his skills and experience. "Business principles are universal," Kwame replied calmly. "Good marketing requires understanding your audience, creating compelling messages, and measuring results. These fundamentals apply everywhere." Brad nodded, but his expression showed he was not convinced. He asked more questions, but each one felt like a test designed for Kwame to fail. When Kwame described a successful campaign, Brad questioned the metrics. When Kwame mentioned strategic planning, Brad suggested that maybe their approach was more sophisticated than what Kwame was used to. Stephanie asked fewer questions, mostly about specific technical skills and software knowledge. Her questions were reasonable and professional. But whenever Brad made a dismissive comment, she would laugh nervously or nod in agreement. She was going along with his behavior even though she seemed uncomfortable with it. The interview lasted 45 minutes. By the end, Kwame had given detailed, impressive answers to every question. He had demonstrated deep knowledge of marketing strategy, digital campaigns, analytics, and team management. On merit alone, he should have been a strong candidate. But he could tell from Brad's body language that none of it mattered. Brad had made up his mind the moment Kwame had started speaking. "Well, thank you for coming in," Brad said, standing up abruptly. "We have several other candidates to interview. We'll be in touch." There was no warmth in his voice, no encouragement, no indication that Kwame had done well. It was a dismissal. Kwame shook their hands again. "Thank you for your time. I look forward to hearing from you." As he walked out of the conference room, he heard voices behind him. The door had not closed completely. Brad's voice carried into the hallway. "Well, that was a waste of time," Brad said. "Did you understand half of what he was saying?" Stephanie's voice was quieter, uncertain. "I mean, I understood him okay. His experience seemed solid." "Come on, Stephanie. Can you imagine him presenting to clients? They'd spend the whole meeting trying to figure out what he's saying." Brad laughed. "Things must work differently where he's from. Probably used to much lower standards." There was a pause. Then Stephanie laughed too, though it sounded forced. "Yeah, I guess you're right. Should I send him the standard rejection email?" "Give it a few days," Brad said. "Don't want to seem too obvious." Then Brad did something that made Kwame stop walking. Brad began speaking in a mocking imitation of Kwame's accent, exaggerating it to make it sound foolish. "I am very comfortable in professional environments," Brad said in a fake accent. "Communication is about clarity, not accent." He laughed again. Kwame stood in the hallway for a moment, his hand gripping his folder tightly. He had experienced discrimination before many times, but it never stopped being painful. It never stopped being insulting. The difference now was that he had the power to do something about it. He walked calmly to the elevator, rode down to the lobby, and left the building. Once in his car, he sat quietly for a moment. Then he pulled out his phone and called Minjun. "How did it go?" Minjun asked. "Exactly as I feared," Kwame replied. "Maybe worse." "Tell me everything." Kwame described the entire interview. He recounted every dismissive comment, every condescending question, every moment of disrespect. He told Minjun about the conversation he had overheard after leaving the room. Minjun was silent for a moment after Kwame finished. Then he said quietly, "They have no idea who they just insulted, do they?" "No," Kwame said. "They have no idea at all. So what do you want to do? We can just walk away. Invest somewhere else. There are plenty of other opportunities. Kwame thought about that. Walking away would be easy. He could forget about TechRise and never think about them again. But something bothered him. The CEO, Jennifer Park, had a reputation for being progressive and fair-minded. Everything he had read about her suggested she genuinely cared about building a good company culture. Did she know what was happening in her own HR department? No, Kwame said slowly. We are not walking away yet. I want to see how deep this goes. Schedule the investor meeting. Let us see what happens when they realize who I am. Are you sure? Minjun asked. This could get uncomfortable. Kwame looked back at the building where TechRise had their offices. Somewhere up there, Brad Mitchell was probably already forgetting about him. Moving on to the next interview, never thinking twice about the man whose time he had wasted and whose dignity he had mocked. I am very sure, Kwame said. Set up the meeting for next week. Full presentation. Tell them the investor wants to meet the entire leadership team, including HR. Minjun understood immediately. Including the people who just interviewed you. Exactly, Kwame confirmed. Let us see how they react when the man they dismissed walks back through that door as the person controlling $15 million. He ended the call and drove back to his office. Along the way, he thought about the young man he had been when he first came to America. That young man had no power and no voice. People had treated him badly, and all he could do was accept it and move forward. But Kwame was not that powerless young man anymore. He had built something. He had earned respect and success. And now he had the ability to hold people accountable. The question was not whether TechRise would get his investment. The question was whether they deserved it. And right now, based on what he had experienced, the answer was no. But Kwame believed in second chances. He believed people and companies could change. The question was whether TechRise would choose to change when faced with the truth about themselves. He would find out soon enough. The next morning, Kwame arrived at his office earlier than usual. The city was still waking up and the streets below were quiet. He made himself coffee and sat at his desk, opening the TechRise folder once again. Minjun arrived an hour later, carrying his own coffee and a serious expression. He knocked on Kwame's door and entered without waiting for a response. I have been thinking about this all night, Minjun said, sitting down. Are you absolutely certain this is the right approach? We could simply pass on this investment. Send them a polite rejection. Move on to the next opportunity. Kwame looked at his friend and partner. They had been through many difficult situations together over the years. Minjun always played the role of careful advisor, making sure they thought through every decision completely. I could do that, Kwame agreed. It would be the easy choice. But would it be the right choice? What do you mean? Kwame stood and walked to his window. If I walk away, what happens? Brad Mitchell continues recruiting people. He continues judging candidates based on how they look and sound rather than what they can do. More people like me get dismissed and insulted. The pattern continues. That is not your responsibility to fix, Minjun pointed out. You cannot solve every company's problems. No, I cannot, Kwame said. But I can address the problems in companies where I invest my money. If I give TechRise $15 million while knowing they have people like Brad in important positions, what does that say about my values? Minjun nodded slowly. He understood. Their investment firm had always been about more than just making money. They wanted to support companies that treated people fairly and built healthy cultures. So what is your plan exactly? Minjun asked. First, I want you to schedule that investor meeting, Kwame said. Tell them I want a full presentation about their company, including their culture and hiring practices. Make sure everyone on the leadership team attends, including HR staff. That will definitely include Brad Mitchell and Stephanie Torres. Exactly. I want them in the room when they realize who I am. And then what? Minjun asked. You reveal yourself and walk out? Make them feel embarrassed and withdraw the investment opportunity? Kwame shook his head. I have not decided yet. That depends on how they respond. How Jennifer Park responds specifically. You think she does not know what is happening in her own company. I have researched her extensively, Kwame said. Everything I have read suggests she genuinely cares about diversity and inclusion. She has given interviews about the importance of building fair workplaces. Either she is lying or she does not know what her HR department is really doing. People often do not know, Minjun said quietly. They set policies and make statements, but they do not see what happens in the daily operations. especially if they surround themselves with people who tell them everything is fine. Kwame knew Minjun was speaking from experience. As a Korean immigrant, Minjun had his own stories of being underestimated and discriminated against. They had bonded over these shared experiences when they first met years ago. That is why this matters, Kwame said. If Jennifer genuinely does not know, she needs to know. And how she reacts will tell me everything about whether this company deserves our investment. Minjun pulled out his phone. I will set up the meeting. What day works for you? Next Tuesday, Kwame said. Exactly 1 week after my interview. Let us see if Brad even remembers me by then. Over the following days, Kwame's team continued their research into TechRise solutions. They dug deeper into the company's practices and culture. What they found was troubling but not entirely surprising. Sarah came to Kwame's office on Thursday with a report. I have been analyzing their hiring data from the past 3 years, she said, spreading papers across his desk. Look at this pattern. The numbers told a clear story. At entry and mid-level positions, TechRise had reasonable diversity, but as you moved up the organizational chart, the diversity disappeared. Senior positions were almost entirely held by white men and a few Asian men. Women held only 20% of leadership roles. Black employees made up less than 5% of the total workforce, and none held senior positions. This could be coincidence, Sarah said. Maybe qualified diverse candidates are not applying. But look at this. She pulled out another document. I contacted 5 former employees who left TechRise in the past year. 3 of them were people of color. All 3 mentioned feeling unwelcome and unsupported. 1 specifically mentioned having negative experiences with the HR department. Kwame read through the notes Sarah had compiled. 1 former employee, a black woman named Angela, had written, I loved the actual work, but the culture was exhausting. I constantly felt like I had to prove myself in ways my white colleagues did not. HR was no help. They made me feel like I was the problem for bringing up concerns. Did you reach out to Brad Mitchell or Stephanie Torres's references? Kwame asked. Yes, Sarah said. Brad has been with TechRise for 3 years. Before that, he worked at 2 other companies. I found some interesting online reviews. Former colleagues at his previous job mentioned that he played favorites and had a reputation for being dismissive toward certain candidates. Nothing explicitly racist, but patterns that suggest bias. And Stephanie? She has been there only 8 months. Less of a track record. From what I can tell, she mostly follows Brad's lead. Several people described her as nice but conflict avoidant. She does not push back even when she disagrees. Kwame absorbed all this information. The picture becoming clear was of a company with good intentions at the top, but serious problems in implementation. Jennifer Park probably believed she was building an inclusive company. Meanwhile, people like Brad Mitchell were quietly undermining those values every day. Thank you, Sarah, Kwame said. This is excellent work. Keep digging. I want to know as much as possible before the meeting on Tuesday. On Monday evening, Minjun called Kwame at home. The meeting is confirmed for tomorrow at 10 in the morning. Jennifer Park herself responded. She sounds very excited. She knows your reputation and is honored that you are considering investing in TechRise. Did you confirm that all leadership team members will attend? Yes. Jennifer personally ensured that everyone would be there, including the HR team. She said she wants you to meet everyone and get a complete picture of the company. Kwame smiled slightly. Perfect. This should be interesting. That night, Kwame had trouble sleeping. He kept thinking about the upcoming meeting. Part of him felt nervous. Confrontation was never pleasant, even when it was necessary. But another part of him felt determined. This was important. How companies treated people mattered. If he had the power to influence positive change, he had a responsibility to use it. Tuesday morning arrived bright and clear. Kwame dressed in one of his best suits, a custom-tailored charcoal gray that fit him perfectly. He wore his expensive watch and his good shoes. He looked every bit the successful investor that he was. The contrast with how he had looked the previous week would be striking. Minjun picked him up along with 2 of their senior analysts, David and Marcus. They would all attend the meeting together. As they drove to TechRise's office, Minjun glanced at Kwame. Are you ready for this? I am ready, Kwame said calmly. They arrived at the building and took the elevator to the 7th floor. The receptionist recognized them immediately this time. She had obviously been told to expect important visitors. Mr. Osei, welcome to TechRise. Ms. Park is expecting you. Please follow me. She led them through the office to a large conference room. It was much bigger than the small room where Kwame had interviewed the previous week. This room had a long table, comfortable chairs, and a large screen for presentations. It was where TechRise held important meetings with clients and investors. "Please make yourselves comfortable," the receptionist said. "Ms. Park and the team will be here momentarily. Can I get anyone coffee or water?" They declined politely. After she left, David whispered, "This is quite different from how they treated you last week." "Money changes how people see you," Kwame said quietly. "That is exactly the problem." The door opened and Jennifer Park entered, followed by a stream of other people. Kwame recognized her from photos he had seen during his research. She was in her late 30s, Korean-American, with an energetic presence and a warm smile. She walked directly to Kwame and extended her hand. "Mr. Osei, it is such an honor to meet you. Thank you so much for considering TechRise for your investment. We have followed your career for years and deeply respect your work." Kwame shook her hand. "Thank you, Ms. Park. I'm impressed by what you have built here." Jennifer began introducing her team. There was Michael, the Chief Technology Officer, Amy, the Chief Financial Officer, Robert, the Head of Product Development, Lisa, the Head of Marketing. Each person shook Kwame's hand with respect and enthusiasm. They were genuinely excited to meet him. Then Jennifer turned to two more people entering the room. "And this is our HR team. Brad Mitchell, our senior recruiter, and Stephanie Torres, one of our recruiters." Kwame watched as Brad walked into the conference room. Brad was looking at his phone and had not yet looked up. When he finally did, his eyes met Kwame's and his face went completely white. All the color drained from his skin in an instant. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He looked like someone who had just seen a ghost. Behind him, Stephanie had the same reaction. Her eyes went wide with shock and horror. She stopped walking so suddenly that she nearly tripped. Her hand went to her mouth as if trying to hold back a gasp. Jennifer noticed nothing. She was still smiling, still making introductions. "Brad and Stephanie handle all our recruiting and HR operations. They are essential to building our team culture." Brad somehow managed to step forward and extend his hand. "Mr. Osei," he said, his voice shaking slightly. It is an honor to meet you." Kwame shook his hand firmly and looked directly into his eyes. "Is it?" Kwame said. "That is interesting. Thank you." The words were simple, but their meaning was clear. Brad's hand was sweating. He pulled back quickly and moved to his seat as far from Kwame as possible. Stephanie followed, looking like she might be sick. She sat down and stared at the table, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Jennifer remained oblivious to the tension. "Please, everyone, take your seats. We have prepared a comprehensive presentation about TechRise solutions. We want to show you everything about our company, our technology, our market position, our growth strategy, and our values." Everyone settled into their chairs. Kwame sat at the head of the table with Minjun beside him. David and Marcus sat on the other side. Jennifer stood at the front with a remote control for the presentation screen. "Let me start by thanking you again for this opportunity," Jennifer began. TechRise was founded 5 years ago with a simple mission: to help businesses work smarter through innovative technology. Today, we serve over 200 clients across 15 industries. The presentation was impressive. Jennifer was an engaging speaker who clearly knew her business inside and out. She showed slides with statistics, customer testimonials, and growth projections. The technology they had developed was genuinely innovative. The market opportunity was substantial. Everything she said reinforced what Kwame already knew from his research. On paper, TechRise was an excellent investment opportunity. Throughout the presentation, Kwame asked thoughtful questions that demonstrated his deep understanding of their industry. He challenged some of their assumptions, pushed them to explain their competitive advantages, and probed into their financial models. It was clear to everyone in the room that Kwame Osei was not just a wealthy investor. He was an intelligent, strategic thinker who understood business at every level. Jennifer answered every question with confidence. Her team contributed additional details when needed. Michael explained the technology. Amy walked through the finances. Robert discussed product development. It was a well-coordinated performance by a capable leadership team. The entire time, Brad and Stephanie sat silently at the far end of the table. They contributed nothing to the presentation. Brad stared at his laptop screen, though Kwame doubted he was seeing anything on it. Stephanie kept glancing at Kwame and then quickly looking away, her face pale and drawn. After an hour, Jennifer wrapped up the business portion of the presentation. Now I want to talk about something equally important to us, our company culture and values. She clicked to a new slide showing photos of smiling employees at various company events. At TechRise, we believe that great technology comes from great teams. We are committed to building a diverse, inclusive workplace where everyone can thrive. Kwame leaned forward slightly. This was the part he had been waiting for. Jennifer continued enthusiastically. We have clear diversity goals. We actively recruit from underrepresented groups. We provide bias training for all employees. We have zero tolerance for discrimination of any kind. She clicked to another slide showing statistics about their workforce demographics. The numbers looked better on the slide than they had in Sarah's analysis. But Kwame noticed they focused on overall diversity, rather than diversity in leadership positions. Our HR team works hard to ensure every candidate has a fair, respectful interview process, Jennifer said, gesturing toward Brad and Stephanie. We believe that how we treat people during recruitment reflects our core values as a company. Brad looked like he wanted to disappear. Stephanie's hands were shaking as she clasped them together on the table. Jennifer smiled proudly. We are not perfect, but we are committed to continuous improvement. We want TechRise to be a place where talent is recognized and valued regardless of background. Kwame sat back in his chair and nodded slowly. That is very admirable, Ms. Park. Tell me, how do you ensure these values are actually practiced, not just stated? That is a great question, Jennifer said. We have regular training, anonymous feedback systems, and an open-door policy for concerns. And has anyone ever raised concerns about bias in your hiring process? Jennifer hesitated for just a moment. We occasionally get feedback, like any company, but our HR team investigates every concern thoroughly and takes appropriate action. Kwame glanced at Brad. Mr. Mitchell, you lead the recruiting team. How do you personally ensure that candidates are evaluated fairly? Brad cleared his throat. His voice came out higher than usual. We follow strict guidelines. We use standardized questions. We evaluate candidates based on their qualifications and experience. Do you ever find that personal bias influences your evaluations? Kwame asked. Perhaps judgments based on how someone speaks or where they come from? The room went very quiet. Everyone sensed that something important was happening, though most people did not understand what. Brad's face had gone from white to red. We all have unconscious biases, but we work to overcome them. That is interesting, Kwame said softly. Because in my experience, some people do not work very hard to overcome their biases at all. Jennifer looked confused. Mr. Osei, is there something specific you are concerned about? Kwame looked at her directly. Ms. Park, I appreciate this presentation very much. Your passion for your company is evident, but I have learned over my career that the real measure of a company is not what they say in presentations. It is what they do when they think no one important is watching. He paused, letting his words sink in. I have one more question before we continue, Kwame said. How do you think your recruitment team treats candidates who do not fit the typical mold? Candidates who might have accents or come from different backgrounds? Jennifer looked genuinely puzzled now. We treat all candidates with respect. That is fundamental to who we are. Brad, would you like to address this? Brad opened his mouth, but no words came out. He knew what was coming. They all did. Kwame let the silence stretch for a long moment. Everyone in the room was watching now. Jennifer looked genuinely confused by the strange direction the conversation had taken. The other executives exchanged glances, trying to understand what was happening. Brad and Stephanie looked like they wanted to run from the room. Finally, Kwame spoke again. Ms. Park, before I invest $15 million in a company, I do more than review financial statements and business plans. I need to understand the culture and values of the organization. I need to know if the people running the company truly embody the principles they claim to hold. Of course, Jennifer said. That makes perfect sense. We would expect nothing less from an investor of your caliber. Good, Kwame said. Then you will understand why I went through your interview process last week. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Jennifer blinked, not understanding at first. I am sorry, what? Last Tuesday afternoon, I applied for your marketing coordinator position under a simplified resume, Kwame explained calmly. I came here for an interview. I wanted to see firsthand how your company treats regular job candidates, People who have no power or influence. People who cannot do anything for you. Jennifer's face showed complete shock. You interviewed here? For a job? Yes, Kwame confirmed. And I had a very interesting experience. One that taught me a great deal about TechRise solutions. Around the table, people were beginning to understand. Michael leaned forward with interest. Amy's mouth had fallen open slightly. Robert and Lisa looked at each other in confusion. And Brad looked like he was about to pass out. I do not understand, Jennifer said slowly. Why would you do that? Because presentations like the one you just gave are easy, Kwame said. Anyone can make slides about diversity and inclusion. Anyone can talk about values and respect. But I wanted to know if those words match reality. So I came here as Kwame Mensah, a job applicant with a Ghanaian accent and no apparent power or importance, and I discovered exactly how your recruitment team treats such people. He turned to look directly at Brad. Mr. Mitchell, would you like to tell Ms. Park about our interview? Brad's face had gone through several colors. Now it was an ashy gray. His mouth moved, but no sound came out at first. Finally, he managed to say, I interviewed many people last week. I do not remember every specific conversation. Let me help you remember, Kwame said, his voice still calm but now with an edge of steel. You questioned whether I could communicate effectively in your fast-paced environment. You suggested that business culture must work differently where I am from. You implied that I would not be comfortable or capable because of how I speak. Jennifer turned to Brad, her expression shifting from confusion to concern. Brad, is this true? Brad tried to respond. There may have been some miscommunication. I was just trying to assess communication skills which are important for the position. Were you? Kwame asked. Because from where I sat, it seemed like you had decided I was not good enough the moment I opened my mouth and you heard my accent. Everything I said after that, my qualifications, my experience, my accomplishments, none of it mattered. You had already made your judgment based on how I sound. Stephanie was crying now, tears running down her face silently. Everyone stared at her, and she tried to wipe her eyes with shaking hands. Ms. Torres, Kwame said, not unkindly, do you have something to add? Stephanie's voice came out as a whisper. I am so sorry. I knew it was wrong. I knew we should not be treating you that way. But I did not say anything. I just went along with it. Jennifer looked like someone had hit her. Brad, Stephanie, what exactly happened in this interview? Brad tried one more time to deflect. I think there has been a misunderstanding. Different cultures have different communication styles, and I was simply... I heard you after I left, Kwame interrupted. The door did not close all the way. I heard you tell Ms. Torres that the interview was a waste of time. I heard you say that clients would spend the whole meeting trying to figure out what I was saying. I heard you mock my accent. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Jennifer's face had gone from concern to angry. The other executives looked horrified. That is not all, Kwame continued. After I left the building, I had my team conduct research into your company's actual practices, not just your stated policies. We analyzed your hiring patterns over 3 years. We spoke with former employees. We found that while you have diversity at entry levels, it disappears as you move up the organization. We found people of color who left your company specifically because they felt unwelcome. We found a pattern of bias that suggests this interview was not an isolated incident. He pulled out several papers from his briefcase and slid them across the table to Jennifer. Here is the data. Look at it carefully. This is what your company actually looks like beneath the surface. Jennifer took the papers with trembling hands. She began reading, and with each page, her expression grew darker. Amy leaned over to look as well, her face showing shock and dismay. I did not know, Jennifer said quietly. I genuinely did not know it was this bad. That is often the problem. Minjun spoke up for the first time. Leaders set good policies and make good statements, but they do not see what happens in daily operations. Discrimination does not announce itself. It hides in individual decisions that seem small but add up to major patterns. Jennifer looked up at Brad with fury in her eyes. How long has this been going on? How many people have you treated this way? Brad tried to defend himself. I never intentionally discriminated against anyone. I was just trying to find the best candidates for our company culture. And what exactly is our company culture? Jennifer demanded. Because from what Mr. Osei is describing, it sounds like a culture where people are judged by their accents and backgrounds rather than their abilities. That is not fair. Brad protested. I have hired diverse candidates. Look at our numbers. At entry level, Kwame said. But how many do you promote? How many make it into leadership? The data shows a clear pattern. People of color and immigrants get hired for junior positions, but somehow never seem qualified for advancement. Michael, the CTO, spoke up. Jennifer, I think we need to take this very seriously. If this is happening in HR, what message does that send to our entire company? Robert added, I have to admit, I have noticed that our leadership team is not very diverse. I assumed we just had not found the right candidates. But maybe the problem is not the candidates we are finding. Maybe the problem is how we evaluate them. Lisa nodded in agreement. I have heard comments sometimes, jokes about accents or names that are hard to pronounce. I thought it was just casual conversation, not something serious. But maybe it is more serious than I realized. Jennifer set the papers down and looked at Kwame directly. Mr. Osei, I am deeply, profoundly sorry for what happened to you. This is not the company I thought I was building. This is not what TechRise is supposed to be. I appreciate your apology, Kwame said. But the question now is what you are going to do about it. Apologies are easy. Change is hard. You are absolutely right, Jennifer said. She turned to Brad. Brad, you are suspended effective immediately. We will conduct a full investigation. If what Mr. Osei describes is confirmed, you will be terminated. Brad stood up abruptly. You are suspending me based on his word? This is unfair. I was just doing my job. Your job is to find talented people and treat all candidates with respect, Jennifer said firmly. From what I am hearing, you failed at the second part completely. Leave now. HR will contact you about the investigation. Brad looked around the room, hoping for support from someone. No one met his eyes. Finally, he grabbed his laptop and walked out, his face red with anger and humiliation. After he left, Jennifer turned to Stephanie. Ms. Torres, you admitted you knew this was wrong but said nothing. That is also a serious problem. Stephanie was still crying. I know, I am so sorry. I was new and I did not want to cause trouble. I thought if I just kept my head down and did my work, everything would be okay. But I was wrong. I should have stood up for what was right. Jennifer looked at her for a long moment. You will be demoted and required to complete extensive training on professional ethics and bias awareness. This is your only chance. If anything like this happens again, you will be terminated immediately. Do you understand? Stephanie nodded miserably. Yes, thank you for giving me another chance. I will do better. Jennifer asked her to leave as well. After Stephanie walked out, the room felt different. The remaining executives looked shaken and uncomfortable. I feel like I need to apologize to all of you as well, Jennifer said to her team. I clearly have not been paying close enough attention to what was happening in our own company. I talked about values and inclusion, but I did not ensure they were actually being practiced. What matters now is what we do next, Amy said. Mr. Osei has shown us a problem. How do we fix it? Jennifer turned back to Kwame. You said change is hard. You are right. But I want to change. I want to fix this. Will you help us? Kwame had not expected that question. What do you mean? You came here to evaluate whether TechRise deserves your investment, Jennifer said. Based on what you experienced, we clearly do not. Not yet. But give us a chance to become the company we should be. Tell us what we need to do. Hold us accountable. Kwame looked at Min-jun, who raised his eyebrows slightly. They had not discussed this possibility. Kwame had expected either to walk away or to invest with conditions. He had not expected Jennifer to directly ask for his guidance in fixing her company's culture. This is not my company, Kwame said. I cannot tell you how to run it. But you have experience that we do not have, Jennifer insisted. You have lived through discrimination. You understand these issues in a way I never will, and clearly my approach was not working. I need help. TechRise needs help. Michael nodded. She is right. We need outside perspective. We need someone who will be honest with us even when it is uncomfortable. Our company has great technology and smart people, Lisa added. But if we have a toxic culture underneath, none of that matters. We will lose talented employees. We will make bad decisions. We will fail eventually, Kwame thought carefully. He had come here expecting confrontation and possibly revenge. He had wanted to see Brad and Stephanie face consequences for their behavior. He had gotten that. But now Jennifer was offering something different, a genuine chance to create positive change. If I agree to help, Kwame said slowly, It will not be easy or comfortable. Real change requires honest examination of every practice and policy. It requires accepting uncomfortable truths. It requires making decisions that some people will not like. I understand, Jennifer said. I am ready for that. And it cannot just be words and promises, Kwame continued. There must be concrete actions with measurable results. Accountability at every level, including yours. Jennifer nodded firmly. Whatever it takes. I built this company because I wanted to create something meaningful. But a meaningful company has to be built on the right foundation. Clearly, our foundation has cracks. Let us fix them properly. Kwame looked around the table at the executives. They all looked back at him with a mixture of hope and nervousness. They knew he held their future in his hands. Not just the $15 million investment, but the future of their company's culture and values. Finally, Kwame spoke. I need time to think about this. This is not a decision I can make in this moment. Give me 48 hours. If I decide to move forward, I will present you with a detailed plan for cultural transformation. It will include specific actions, timelines, and measurable goals. It will be written into the investment terms. If you fail to meet these goals, I will have additional oversight rights. That seems fair, Jennifer said immediately. More than fair, actually. There is one more thing, Kwame added. I want to speak with some of your employees privately. Not management, but regular staff members. I want to hear their experiences and perspectives. Can you arrange that? Of course, Jennifer said. I will send out an invitation. Anyone who wants to speak with you can do so confidentially. Kwame stood up and everyone else stood as well. He shook Jennifer's hand. You have been honest today and you took immediate action when confronted with the truth. That matters. But the real test will be what happens over the next weeks and months when the spotlight is not on you. I understand, Jennifer said. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. Many people in your position would have simply walked away. The fact that you are willing to consider helping us says something about your character. Or perhaps it says something about hope, Kwame replied. I want to believe that people and companies can change when they choose to. But belief requires evidence. Show me that TechRise can be different. As Kwame and his team left the building, Minjun shook his head in amazement. That was not what I expected. No, Kwame agreed. It was not what I expected either. So what are you thinking? David asked. Are you really considering investing after what they did to you? Kwame looked back at the building. I am considering giving them a chance to prove they deserve it. That is different from simply investing. They have a long way to go. But you believe they can get there? Marcus asked. Kwame thought about Jennifer's reaction, the shock and anger on her face when she learned the truth. He thought about how quickly she had acted, suspending Brad without hesitation. He thought about her willingness to accept outside guidance and accountability. I believe she wants to get there, Kwame said. Whether she can actually do it, that remains to be seen. Over the next 2 days, Kwame thought about little else besides TechRise. He reviewed all the research his team had compiled. He examined the hiring patterns, the employee feedback, and the organizational structure. He thought about Jennifer's reaction and her willingness to change. Most importantly, he thought about what real change would actually require. On Wednesday afternoon, Kwame received an email from Jennifer. She had arranged for him to meet with 12 TechRise employees the following day. They had all volunteered to speak with him confidentially. The meetings would be one-on-one, 30 minutes each, in a private conference room. Thursday morning, Kwame returned to TechRise. This time he came alone. He wanted the employees to feel comfortable speaking honestly without a crowd of executives or analysts around. Jennifer met him in the lobby and escorted him to a small conference room away from the main office area. Thank you for doing this, Jennifer said. I know you did not have to. If I am going to invest in your company, I need to understand it fully, Kwame replied. That means hearing from the people who work here every day, not just the leaders. Jennifer nodded. The first person should be here in a few minutes. I will leave you alone. My assistant will send people in every 30 minutes. After she left, Kwame sat down and prepared his questions. He wanted to understand how employees experienced the company culture. Did they feel respected? Did they feel they could grow and advance? Did they see bias or discrimination in daily operations? The first employee arrived. Her name was Rachel and she worked in the marketing department. She was white, in her late 20s, and seemed nervous. Thank you for speaking with me, Kwame said warmly. Please sit down. I want you to know this conversation is confidential. I am not here to get anyone in trouble. I just want to understand what working at TechRise is really like. Rachel relaxed slightly. Okay, I heard about what happened with Brad. Everyone is talking about it. What are people saying? Honestly, most people are not surprised. Brad had a reputation. He was always kind of selective about who he liked and who he did not. Some of us noticed patterns, but no one wanted to say anything. Why not? Quam asked. Rachel shrugged uncomfortably. He had power over hiring. If you complained about him, you worried he might make things difficult for your friends who were applying or for future hires on your team. Also, Jennifer seemed to trust him, so it felt like complaining would not go anywhere. What kind of patterns did you notice? Mostly in who got hired and who did not. Brad seemed to prefer certain types of people. You know, people who looked and sounded like him. When diverse candidates did get hired, they often ended up on lower-level teams. I have a friend who is Indian. Super qualified, but she felt like she hit a wall trying to move up. Kwame made notes as Rachel spoke. She gave him several specific examples of situations where she had observed bias, though she admitted she had never reported any of them formally. The next employee was Marcus, a black software engineer in his early 30s. He had been with TechRise for 2 years. I almost left this company 3 times, Marcus said bluntly. The work is good, the technology is interesting, but the environment is exhausting. Tell me more, Kwame encouraged. I am always the only black person in meetings. Always. People make assumptions about me. They assume I am less experienced than I am. They explain basic concepts to me that I already know. In code reviews, my work gets scrutinized more carefully than my colleagues. I have to prove myself over and over, while other people get the benefit of the doubt. Have you reported these experiences? Marcus laughed bitterly. I tried once. I mentioned to Brad that I felt like I was being held to a different standard. You know what he said? He told me I might be being too sensitive. He suggested that maybe I should focus more on my work and less on feelings. That must have been frustrating. Frustrating does not begin to cover it, Marcus said. After that, I just stopped trying. I kept my head down, did my work, and looked for other jobs. But then I heard what happened with you, and I thought, maybe things might actually change. Kwame met with 10 more employees throughout the day. Each conversation added another piece to the puzzle. He heard from a Latina woman who felt her accent was mocked in team meetings. He heard from an Asian engineer who was tired of being asked where he was really from. He heard from a white employee who admitted she had witnessed discrimination but had not known how to address it. He heard from a gay employee who felt he had to hide parts of his identity to fit into the company culture. Not every story was negative. Some employees genuinely loved working at TechRise. They praised the technology, the mission, and Jennifer's leadership. But even the positive reviews often included a phrase like, but, or except. There was always something underneath the surface, something that made the experience less than it should be. By the end of the day, Kwame had pages of notes. He thanked the last employee and sat alone in the conference room for a while, processing everything he had heard. The picture was clear. TechRise had significant cultural problems that went beyond just Brad Mitchell. The problems were systemic, built into the daily operations and attitudes of the organization. But Kwame also felt something else: hope. The employees who had spoken to him were honest and thoughtful. They wanted the company to improve. They were willing to be part of the solution. That mattered. That evening, Kwame met with Minjun at a quiet restaurant near their office. They sat in a corner booth where they could talk privately. Tell me about the employee meetings, Minjun said. Kwame summarized what he had learned. He described the patterns of bias, the barriers to advancement, the daily microaggressions that made life harder for employees from underrepresented groups. So the question is, Minjun said, can Jennifer really fix all of this? Is she capable of the kind of transformation required? I think she wants to, Kwame said. But wanting and doing are different things. Change like this is hard. It requires sustained effort over months and years, not just a few quick fixes. What are you going to propose? Kwame pulled out his laptop and showed Minjun the document he had been working on. It was a detailed plan for cultural transformation at TechRise. The plan included immediate actions, medium-term goals, and long-term structural changes. It was comprehensive and demanding. Minjun read through it carefully. After several minutes, he looked up. This is extensive. You are basically asking them to rebuild their entire HR department and change how they make decisions at every level. Yes, Kwame confirmed, because that is what is needed. Small changes will not fix systemic problems. They need to rethink everything from how they recruit to how they promote to how they measure success. What if they refuse? What if Jennifer looks at this and decides it is too much? Then we walk away, Kwame said simply. I will not invest in a company that is not willing to do the hard work of creating a fair and inclusive culture. There are plenty of other investment opportunities. And if she agrees to all of this but then fails to follow through, that is why I am writing it into the investment terms, Kwame explained. If they fail to meet the cultural benchmarks, I get additional oversight rights. I can require changes to leadership policies or practices. They will be contractually obligated to make progress. Minjun nodded slowly. This is more than an investment. You are basically becoming a partner in fixing their company. I suppose I am, Kwame agreed. The question is whether that is the right decision. What does your gut tell you? Kwame thought about that. He remembered the shock on Jennifer's face when she learned the truth. He remembered how quickly she had acted, suspending Brad without hesitation. He remembered the employees who wanted their company to be better and were willing to work for it. My gut tells me this is worth trying, Kwame said. But my head tells me to be cautious and protect ourselves with strong contractual terms. Then we do both, Minjun said. We invest with hope but prepare for disappointment. The next morning, Friday, Kwame sent his proposal to Jennifer. It was 40 pages long, detailing every aspect of the cultural transformation he believed TechRise needed. He did not soften anything or make it easier. If Jennifer wanted his investment, she would have to commit fully to change. Jennifer called him within 2 hours of receiving the document. Can we meet today? I have read your proposal and I want to discuss it in person. They met at a coffee shop halfway between their offices. Jennifer arrived with her copy of the proposal, marked up with notes and questions. She looked tired, like she had not slept much. I stayed up most of the night reading this, Jennifer said as they sat down. It is comprehensive and demanding and honestly a little frightening. Change is frightening, Kwame said, especially when it requires admitting mistakes and rebuilding systems you thought were working. Some of these requirements are going to be difficult to implement, Jennifer said, flipping through the pages. Mandatory bias training for all employees, anonymous reporting systems with third-party review, diverse interview panels for every hiring decision, regular equity audits. It is a lot. It needs to be a lot, Kwame said. Small changes will not fix the problems we identified. You need systemic transformation. Jennifer nodded. I know, you are right. But some of my leadership team are concerned about the cost and time involved. Michael asked me this morning if we really need to do all of this just to get funding. Let me be clear, Kwame said firmly. This is not about getting funding. This is about building a company that deserves to exist and grow. If you are only willing to make changes because I am requiring it, then those changes will not last. The moment I stop watching, everything will slide back to how it was. That is not what I want, Jennifer said quickly. I genuinely want to fix this, but I also have to be realistic about what we can accomplish and how quickly. Then let us talk about priorities, Kwame suggested. What parts of the proposal do you think are most important to implement immediately? They spent the next 2 hours going through the proposal, page by page. Jennifer asked questions and raised concerns. Kwame explained his reasoning and listened to her perspective. Slowly, they began to shape the plan into something that felt both comprehensive and achievable. Some items would be implemented immediately: firing Brad, restructuring the HR department, creating an anonymous feedback system, and starting company-wide discussions about bias and inclusion. Other items would be rolled out over 6 months: new hiring practices, promotion criteria, leadership development programs for underrepresented groups. Long-term items would be tracked over 18 months. Measurable increases in diversity at all levels, employee satisfaction scores, retention rates for diverse employees. What about the board seat? Jennifer asked, referring to one of Kwame's requirements. You want a seat on our board of directors with special oversight over cultural initiatives? Yes, Kwame confirmed. I need to be able to monitor progress and intervene if necessary. If you fail to meet the agreed-upon benchmarks, I want the authority to require changes. Jennifer bit her lip. That is a lot of control to give an outside investor. It is also a lot of accountability, Kwame countered. I will be personally invested in your success, not just financially but reputationally. If TechRise fails to change, that reflects badly on me as well. This is a partnership, not just a transaction. Jennifer looked at him carefully. Why are you doing this? You could invest in any company you want. Why take on the headache of fixing our culture? Kwame thought about how to answer that. He thought about the young man he had been 20 years ago, arriving in America with dreams and determination. He thought about all the times he had been dismissed, underestimated, and disrespected because of his accent or his background. He thought about the power he now had and the responsibility that came with it. Because I can, Kwame said simply. Because I have resources and experience that can help. Because if people with power do not use it to create positive change, then nothing will ever improve. And because I want to prove that companies can be both successful and fair, those things do not have to be in conflict. Jennifer smiled for the first time that afternoon. Okay, let us do this, all of it. I will get my leadership team on board. We will implement your plan. We will meet your benchmarks. And we will build the company we should have been from the beginning. You understand this will be hard? Kwame asked. Some people will resist. Some employees might leave if they do not like the changes. Some decisions will be unpopular. I understand, Jennifer said firmly. But doing the right thing is often hard. That does not mean we should avoid it. They shook hands across the table. It was not just an agreement about money and investment terms. It was a commitment to transformation, to growth, to building something better. Over the weekend, lawyers from both sides worked on the investment contract. They incorporated all of Kwame's cultural requirements alongside the standard financial terms. By Monday morning, the contract was ready for signatures. Kwame sat in his office, reading through the final version one more time. Minjun sat across from him, watching his face. Are you certain about this? Minjun asked. You are taking on a lot of responsibility here. I am certain, Kwame said. This is the right thing to do. He signed the contract with a steady hand. $15 million would flow to TechRise Solutions. In exchange, Kwame would get equity in the company, a board seat, and the power to hold them accountable for creating real cultural change. But more than that, he would get the chance to prove that business and ethics could work together, that profit and principles were not enemies, that companies could grow and succeed while treating people fairly and with respect. It was a big bet. But Kwame had built his fortune on big bets that others thought were impossible. This one felt different, though. This one was personal. 6 months passed. Kwame stood in the conference room at TechRise looking at the quarterly diversity report on the screen. The numbers told a story of slow but genuine progress. The company had not transformed overnight, but real changes were happening. Jennifer stood beside him, presenting the data to the board of directors. Kwame now attended these meetings regularly as part of his board seat agreement. He listened carefully as Jennifer walked through each metric. Our overall workforce diversity has increased by 12%, Jennifer explained. More significantly, we have seen a 23% increase in diversity at the management level. We promoted 4 people from underrepresented groups to senior positions in the past 6 months. Michael, the CTO, added, We also restructured our technical interview process. We now use diverse interview panels and standardized evaluation criteria. Our offer acceptance rate from diverse candidates has improved by 35%. Amy, the CFO, contributed financial data. The investment in bias training and new HR systems cost us about $200,000. But our employee retention has improved dramatically. We are saving money by not constantly replacing people who leave due to cultural issues. Kwame asked questions throughout the presentation. He pushed them on specific decisions and challenged assumptions. But overall, he was impressed. TechRise was doing the work, not just talking about it. After the board meeting ended, Kwame walked through the office with Jennifer. He wanted to see the changes with his own eyes, not just read about them in reports. The physical space looked different. The walls now displayed photos that reflected genuine diversity, employees of different races, ages, and backgrounds working together. The company had created quiet spaces for prayer and meditation, recognizing that employees had different cultural and religious needs. The kitchen area had expanded to include foods from various cultural traditions during company events. But more than the physical changes, Kwame noticed something else. The atmosphere felt different, more relaxed, more open. He saw employees of different backgrounds chatting comfortably together. He heard conversations in multiple languages. He saw people being themselves without seeming to hide parts of their identity. "Let me show you our new HR department," Jennifer said, leading him to a different area of the office. After Brad had been fired, Jennifer had completely restructured HR. She hired a new director, a woman named Keisha Williams who had 20 years of experience in diversity and inclusion. Keisha had brought in fresh perspectives and new systems. They found Keisha in her office reviewing candidate applications with 2 recruiters. Both recruiters were new hires who had replaced Brad and his old team. One was a black woman named Tamara. The other was a South Asian man named Rajesh. "Mr. Osei," Keisha greeted him warmly. "Perfect timing. We just finished reviewing applications for our senior product manager position. Want to see our new process?" Kwame sat down as Keisha explained. Each candidate now went through a structured evaluation. Resumes were initially reviewed with names and personal information removed to reduce unconscious bias. Interview questions were standardized across all candidates. Every interview panel included at least 3 people from different backgrounds. Decisions were made based on clear criteria documented in advance. "We also implemented something new," Tamara added. "After every hiring process, we do an equity audit. We look at who made it through each stage and analyze whether there were any patterns that might indicate bias." "And when you find patterns?" Kwame asked. "We investigate," Rajesh said. "If someone consistently rates candidates from certain backgrounds lower, we provide additional training. If the pattern continues, we remove them from the interview process." Kwame nodded approvingly. This is exactly the kind of systematic approach needed. As they left the HR department, Jennifer said quietly, "I wish I had seen these problems earlier. I was so focused on building the technology and growing the business that I did not pay attention to who we were becoming as a company." "Many leaders make that mistake," Kwame said. "What matters is that you are fixing it now." They stopped at a break area where several employees were having coffee. One of them was Marcus, the black engineer Kwame had interviewed 6 months ago. Marcus had been close to leaving the company back then, exhausted by the constant bias he experienced. Now he looked different, more relaxed, more engaged. "Mr. Osei," Marcus called out with a smile. "Good to see you. Still keeping us honest?" "Always," Kwame replied. "How are things going for you?" "Better," Marcus said genuinely. "Actually, much better. I got promoted to lead engineer last month, and I have been working with Keisha to mentor other black engineers. We started an affinity group for employees of color. It has made a huge difference to have community and support." "I am glad to hear it," Kwame said. "You deserve to be in an environment where your talent is recognized." After Marcus walked away, Jennifer said, "That is one of the things I am most proud of. People like Marcus who were ready to leave are now engaged and thriving. We nearly lost so much talent because of our failures." They continued walking and encountered Stephanie Torres in the hallway. Stephanie had stayed with the company after being demoted. She had completed extensive training on bias awareness and professional ethics. Now she worked as a junior recruiter under Keisha's close supervision. "Ms. Park, Mr. Osei," Stephanie said nervously. She still seemed uncomfortable around Kwame, which was understandable. "How are you doing, Stephanie?" Kwame asked. "I am doing okay," she said. "Thank you for asking. I wanted to tell you, I know I apologized before, but I want to say it again. What I did was wrong. What I failed to do was wrong. I have learned a lot these past months about my own biases and about courage, about speaking up even when it is uncomfortable." "That is good," Kwame said. "Learning from mistakes is how we grow." "I just led my first interview panel yesterday," Stephanie continued. "We interviewed a candidate who had an accent similar to yours, and I made sure he was treated with respect and evaluated fairly. I thought of you during that interview. I thought about how I should have acted 6 months ago. The past cannot be changed," Kwame said, "but you can choose who you want to be going forward. That choice matters." After Stephanie left, Jennifer and Kwame sat down in her office. On Jennifer's desk were letters from employees thanking her for the changes at TechRise. There were also a few angry letters from people who had left the company because they disagreed with the new direction. "We lost 8 employees," Jennifer said. "People who felt that the focus on diversity and inclusion was unnecessary or was taking attention away from the work. I will not lie, those departures were painful, but necessary," Kwame said. "Yes," Jennifer agreed. I realized that not everyone belonged in the company I want to build. Some people only felt comfortable in the old environment because it gave them unfair advantages. When we leveled the playing field, they did not like it. She pulled out another folder. But look at this. We have had 43 applications from talented people who specifically mentioned our culture changes as a reason they want to work here. We are becoming known as a company that takes these issues seriously. That reputation is attracting exactly the kind of people we need. Kwame reviewed the applications. They were impressive, experienced professionals from diverse backgrounds who were looking for companies that matched their values. There is something else I want to show you, Jennifer said. She pulled up data on her computer. These are our product development metrics from the past 6 months. Innovation has increased. We are solving problems faster and creating better solutions. Why do you think that is? Kwame asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Because we have more diverse perspectives at the table, Jennifer said. When everyone on a team thinks the same way, you get limited solutions. When you have people from different backgrounds and experiences, you get richer ideas. The business case for diversity is not just about fairness, though that should be reason enough. It is also about being smarter and more creative. Kwame smiled. Now you sound like someone who truly understands. They talked for another hour about the ongoing challenges. Change was not easy or simple. There were still problems to solve, still areas where TechRise needed to improve, but the direction was clear, and the commitment was real. As Kwame prepared to leave, Jennifer walked him to the elevator. I want to thank you again for not giving up on us, for seeing potential even after experiencing our worst. I did not do this for you, Kwame said honestly. I did it for Marcus and all the other employees who deserved better. I did it for the job candidates who will be treated fairly now. I did it because someone had to. Still, Jennifer said, you could have just walked away. You chose to help instead. That says something about who you are. The elevator arrived. Before Kwame stepped in, Jennifer asked one more question. Do you forgive us? Do you forgive me for not knowing and Brad for what he did? Kwame thought carefully about that. Forgiveness was complicated. The hurt and insult he had experienced that day 6 months ago had not disappeared. The memory of Brad mocking his accent still stung when he thought about it. I am not sure forgiveness is the right word, Kwame said slowly, but I believe in growth and change. I believe people and companies can become better than they were. Brad is gone, and that is appropriate. You have stayed and done the hard work of transformation. That matters. Whether I forgive or not is less important than whether you continue doing the right thing. Jennifer nodded, accepting his honesty. We will. I promise you that. 3 months later, Kwame received a phone call from another startup founder seeking investment. The founder, a young woman named Sarah, had heard about Kwame's approach. I know about what you did with TechRise, Sarah said. How you went undercover as a job applicant to test their culture. I think that is brilliant. I would like to invite you to do the same with my company. Come interview with us. See what we are really like when we do not know you are watching. If you find problems, help us fix them before they become bigger. Kwame was surprised. You are asking me to test you? Yes, Sarah said. Because I want to build something real, something good. And I'm smart enough to know I probably have blind spots. I would rather discover them now with your help than later when they have caused serious damage. Kwame smiled. Perhaps things were changing after all. Perhaps his approach with TechRise was influencing how other companies thought about culture and values. Let me think about your offer, Kwame said. Send me your business plan and I will review it. After ending the call, Kwame looked at his calendar. He had a meeting scheduled at TechRise next week for their 9-month review. The data he had seen so far suggested they were continuing to make progress. Diversity numbers were up. Employee satisfaction scores had improved. Product innovation metrics were strong. More importantly, the culture felt different. People felt safe being themselves. Talent was being recognized regardless of background. Fairness was becoming part of the company's DNA, not just a policy in a handbook. It was not perfect. It would never be perfect. There would always be more work to do, always room for improvement. But TechRise had proven that change was possible when leaders were willing to do the difficult work of transformation. Kwame's phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus at TechRise. Hey, Mr. Osei, I know you are coming by next week. I wanted to let you know I'm organizing a panel discussion on navigating corporate spaces as a person of color. Would you be willing to speak? Your story about the interview has inspired a lot of us. Kwame typed back, I would be honored. He set down his phone and looked out his window at the city below. Somewhere in those buildings were other companies with great technology and smart people, but toxic cultures underneath the surface. Companies where talented people were being overlooked and underestimated because of how they looked or sounded. Companies that thought diversity was a checkbox rather than a fundamental value. Some of those companies would fail, destroyed by their own bias and narrow thinking. Others would survive but never reach their full potential, limited by their inability to see talent in people who did not fit a narrow mold. But maybe, just maybe, some of them would change. Maybe they would learn from what happened at TechRise. Maybe they would understand that building. A fair and inclusive culture was not just the right thing to do morally, it was the smart thing to do for business. Kwame had built his fortune by seeing potential that others missed, by investing in people and ideas that were overlooked, by taking risks that seemed impossible to others. His undercover interview at TechRise had been another kind of risk, a test to see if a company could face hard truths and choose to become better. They had passed that test. Not perfectly, not easily, but genuinely. And in doing so, they had shown that transformation was possible when people chose courage over comfort, honesty over denial, and action over words. 6 months ago, Kwame had walked into TechRise as a job applicant and been treated with disrespect and discrimination. Today, he walked in as a board member and partner, helping to build a company that respected every person who walked through its doors. That was not revenge. That was redemption, and it was more satisfying than revenge could ever be. Kwame opened his laptop and began drafting a response to Sarah, the founder who had asked him to test her company. He would accept her invitation. He would continue doing this work, holding companies accountable, helping leaders who were willing to change, because someone had to. Because he could. And because in the end that was what power was for, not to elevate yourself above others, but to lift others up to where they deserve to be. He began typing, Dear Sarah, I would be interested in learning more about your company. Let us schedule a time for me to come by for an interview.